Welcome to NSF's Europe's Future in Space. You know the drill. This is the show where we invite people from the European space industry so that we can get to know them a little bit better. And of course, at the same time, that allows them to talk all about the cool stuff that they're working for Europe's Future in Space. Well, the intro.
And here we go.
We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roger, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flighting outside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange!
R45. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Décollage. Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You bet. Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Europe's Future in Space. I'm already seeing some of those reactions to that. Not very well cold open, I guess. But, you know, a few months ago, we had on our show a launch site company with Saxavoord, and we interviewed a launch company shortly after that will be using that launch site, Rocket Factory Osper. But in this episode, episode 10 of Europe's Future in Space, we have another one of those folks that might be using that Saxavoord launch site, and they are a company local to there because they are from the United Kingdom. So welcome to Derek Harris from from Skyrora. He's the head of business development at the company, and we're going to be talking about all of the things that this company is currently planning for, rockets and space talks. And you guys have a lot of things going on, right?
Well, thank you very much, Alex, for inviting me along today. It's really exciting to be here. I've managed to catch a few of the shows in the past, so when we've seen it come in, it was delighted to take part. But yeah, I'm here to answer your questions on launch, space tug, and anything else we may be working on.
Yeah, that's right. I know you guys have a lot of things working on in the background and whatnot. I already have looked at the website and everything. There's a lot of things going on there, so I'm really curious to chat about all of that. But of course, you know, always we have some questions already prepared so that we don't come here blank essentially. But we are also wanting to see what are your guys' questions, and of course we're gonna have DYs in the background to grab all of the comments from the chat. You know the drill. Tag at NASASpaceflight in chat, and D will be grabbing all of those from there. Thank you, D, for that.
Of course.
And of course, thanks Jay Keegan as well for producing the show, arranging these interviews as well. Already the 10th episode, so that's a lot of interviews that we have already arranged. There are more in the background. Don't worry if you've not seen some of your favorite companies or whatever. There's a lot more to come. But of course, we are here right now to talk about Skyrora, and Derek, there's one of these things that this is like the first question that I have, which is, why Skyrora? How did it come to be? Like, tell us a little bit about the sort of the beginnings of the company and what you guys are sort of trying to do.
Yeah, I think you have to go back because we've just recently celebrated our 8th anniversary from basically being founded. So if we go back to the founder, who was a gentleman by the name of Vladimir Levikin, a Ukrainian national and British national, who moved to the United Kingdom many years ago, and then his IT businesses took him to the United States. While he was out in the United States, it started to have the story that the UK wanted to become a spacefaring nation again, rather than just doing what we do well, which is satellites, cabling, data, everything like this, which actually possibly the people listening didn't know about. But he then saw an opportunity to take his heritage as well and combine it with the UK heritage and bring back a program that hadn't been around for over 50 years almost. I'm talking about Black Arrow, of course, when I speak about those sort of timeframes. So what people I expect will know, because I'm guessing we have a very well-versed audience for this purpose, is Dnipro is the rocket city in Ukraine, and this is where Vladimir lived close to. So he knew combining the staff and the heritage from there with the heritage from the UK on the types of propulsion that we used would be a surefire way to sort of push forward quite rapidly a launch company. And that was the start and spark, I would say, 8 years ago.
Yeah, and so is that also like the reason for some of the names? Because of course we're gonna be talking about Skylark and Skyrora and all that, all of the different rocket options. But I did see that you guys have the Skylark, and that sounds a little bit familiar. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. So there's a lot of love with the heritage of the British program that we have within us. So the Skylark, obviously, for those that may not know, is an old missile program from the UK back again in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s era. You had that Black Knight and as well as Black Arrow for that purpose. So when we started to do our naming conventions, we thought it would be nice to have that historical link, especially because a lot of these vehicles were actually high test peroxide as an oxidizer, which is similar to what we are using today.
Yeah, we're seeing some of those shots here from the Black Arrow, I think it is. I don't remember exactly all of the names from these old rockets, but I do remember that it's sort of nicknamed the lipstick rocket, if you
It
know.
certainly was. So that went out, I believe it was 1971 in Woomera in
Mhm.
Australia. And actually, one of the first jobs I had to do with the company was actually to find that in the desert in Woomera with the local community out there. And we negotiated to bring it back to the UK so we could have that heritage back in the UK. So just like you have a lot in the United States, you'll have old Atlas vehicles or old sort of different basically bodies and different parts that you can show off to help inspire the next generation. We did that and wanted to bring that back so we could do the same in the UK. And it actually became quite poignant because we then managed to find some of the older engineers who were in retirement but had worked on the project as well. And we got to hear all the stories, all the problems that they had when they were developing the vehicle. And it really gave us a connection to the past to help drive us forward.
Yeah, that is one of those things that it's always important. Like look to the future, but also try to inspire people by say, hey, there are these things that were done in the past that were rather cool. Let's try and sort of do more cool things in the future. I guess that's sort of the whole thing, like the thread that joins together the past and the future, right? And so this is one of those things that I always ask as well. Because my next question now is like, what do you guys do? Because you were talking about the heritage and things like that. You've got the Skylark series of rockets. You've got Skyrora XL. Like, what sort of products does your company have? Like all of these different things that you guys are building
Thanks for that,
before we
Alex.
go into the details.
That's a very good question with that. So, when we first started out, we had to go through a de-risking approach because no one had done anything in 50 years.
Mm.
All the regulations, there was none of them properly set in place. So, there was very little framework. To be honest, the only thing you could launch was probably the size of a small university-led project within the UK. Those were the only regulations were in place. So we had to sort of build up and learn from those. So as you said, the vehicles were called Skylark Nano, Skylark Micro. Uh,
Mhm.
for the first two, those allowed us to just gain a little bit of experience within the team to move those forwards. And that was all leading to Skylark L, L being large, and then the Skyrora XL, where we've dropped the Skylark on that one. But both of them are different from the other vehicles, mostly because they're liquid propulsion, whereas the first couple were solid. So what that really looks at is the L, Skylark L, the one that we'll be talking probably quite a bit about today, I expect, was our main testing vehicle. This allowed us to test out certain electronic systems and basically work with a bit of pressurized tanks before we moved on to working with our turbo pumps. But the XL is going to be the main workhorse for us, and this will be the ones that you'll see in the next few years. That'll start with the demo onto the commercial launch. He's taking satellites into orbit from Scotland for that purpose. Also, there is another product there that you alluded to, which would be our third stage, which can actually be used as a space tug. So we're looking at developing that to see how that can be used for in-orbit servicing as time goes on. So we have great ideas and great thoughts on what we want to do to that. So in the UK, we have something called an MOT, basically servicing and looking after your vehicle. And the thoughts in and around that is basically how can we look at extending lives, or do we always need to sort of scrap a satellite when it's done? So do a sort of once over with the camera, sensors, and hopefully as time goes on, it could become such a simple activity to be plug and play for replacing solar panels or taking things to decay in orbit. So these are just some of the fantastic things that the team are working on.
Yeah, so that is, I mean, that is a great range of different options, I guess. You were talking about how you had the Skylark Nano and Micro, I think it was, right? The names that you used.
Yeah, so I have a fondness for Skylark Nano. So as I was saying to you before the show, I'm not an engineer by any way, shape, or form, and the team will make sure that I don't touch anything in that regards. But with the Skylark Nano, they actually did let me paint and sand one of them, so I have a bit of an affection to them.
Oh.
But it was a very, very early model for us, and that allowed us to build a lot of relationships with the regulatory boards that we need to speak with, so the air traffic control and things like this. And I can see you've got the video up beside me at the moment. This was one of the first things there. So we started to use this as a sort of, again, as I said, an early stage test bed for us. And this is in the Scottish Highlands. So not only is it just one of the most beautiful places to launch a rocket from, it's so, so quiet. And then once it's done, you have to then go and find it, which was always a bit of fun. So you got to go for a hike through the mountains. But pulling it all together, it was the most common sense first step for us, given that there was no regulations in place and we were slowly having to build our team up from scratch as well. Using these allowed us to bring people in to start training, health and safety, all of the things that we would need to get to where we are today.
Yeah, and the important thing to mention here, right, that these two smaller versions were just for development, right? Like you're not doing those again or anything like that. There's no services for it, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. Unfortunately, if you want, we can't sell you any products on these ones. If we ever make them again, they're usually used for some sort of small testing, which is done in house for the team. But no, those products are again is just a fond look back on heritage of the company more than anything.
So now let's go to the still suborbital, but still bigger than those rockets, the Skylark L, because it's like this is one that you actually launched a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken. You know, I have here my notes in October 2022. What happened there? Can you walk us through a little bit of that story?
Yeah, certainly. So basically, the vehicle was ready since about 2020. And unfortunately, the regulations and such were not. So we had this vehicle, we had nowhere to launch it in the UK. After a sort of length of time, we were like, well, when will the license come? When will the license come? And unfortunately, it was just wasn't coming. So we spoke with different departments to see if we could get the correct permits to export it to another country. When we were told it depended on the country, we spoke to 2 or 3 ranges. Obviously, you have S range that was set up. We had Andoya, which was there as well. But we were also put in touch with a couple of colleagues who were in Iceland. And Iceland had done smaller suborbital launches. They don't actually have an established spaceport. And that's where we went to, first of all, for micro, and we started to build the relationship with the government. And when we said, well, we would like to come back with Skylark L, except this one's a lot bigger. This one's bigger than 2 meters tall. This one is 11 meters tall, a meter
Yeah.
wide, and potentially is going to go to 126 kilometers. Uh, and they were like, okay, that's a different question than we've ever been asked for before. We don't have a law, we don't have a framework or regulations, but let's sit down. So that's what happened. Myself, some of our technical team, our head of government affairs, we all sort of went across in different batches, sat down and spoke with the air traffic control, environmental agencies, and all the way up to the president of Iceland, and sort of said, this is what we want to
Wow.
actually do for that. There is a funny story with the president I can come back to if we've got time later. But basically, we went through it and we figured out what stakeholders needed to have something in sort of skin in the game for. And we drew up the checklist and we went through and we appeased everyone within that list. And then they gave us the permission to do that launch in the October.
Yeah, and so that launch happened, and how did it go? Let's let's also
Well,
go through that.
I think this is a great thing when you talk about launch, and I think it was a success, and I think most of the team agree
Okay.
with that. And the reason we say that is it managed to set up a mobile spaceport. We had the vehicle leave the launch site. Unfortunately, we did have to abort it afterwards because there was an anomaly, which we have found out what it is after that. So for me, the success was all the information we got from setting up that spaceport, basically proving that we could be agile, adaptable, and have a mission done within 7 to 10 days. And for that purpose, did we get to the full 126 kilometers we wanted on that day? No. But we prepared again, we built another one, and we'll go again.
Yeah, and what happened there? Like what sort of anomaly? Did you guys find out what happened there?
Yeah, so it was a very, very interesting one at the time. So what was basically happening with it and the anomaly was to do with the software at the time. So
Oh.
we were sending commands across to the vehicle to do what it was actually being told to do. So get ready for takeoff, start to open up valves, things like this. And we could tell it wasn't doing it. So when we sent the abort through to stop it, everything went through. So it was like everything was clogged up within the signals going through. And when the abort went through, it pushed everything through. So it managed to open the valve up for literally fractions of a second, but it was enough to take the vehicle off the pad. Which otherwise we could have sort of regrouped and went again a day or two later to with that purpose. But
Mm.
this is something we were able to review, and we've now done a very lot of testing around because no one wants to do that again and sort of have the vehicle go like that. We really want to make the next one go well.
Well, let's hope at least for a better outcome for the next one. I guess, in this day and age, we're already used to like first flights are never super duper perfect, I guess, and that's the spirit, right? That you learn from them, you put again the rocket on the pad, and then fly again. But that's the thing that the next time it's on the pad, it's not going to be on the same location. Am I right on that?
That's correct. So, for those that may have missed the news this week, we got our launch license, which allows us to fly from Saxonford in Scotland. So, this will be the first Scottish or UK rocket built in the UK, launched from the UK. The previous one, Black Arrow, as I said, launched from Australia. So, it's really exciting to be able to be the first one to do this, the first British manufactured rocket, commercial rocket to do this. So, we're really, really happy to do so with that.
Well, I'm really excited to talk all about that. And, before we get to all that, though, it's already been about 20 minutes here on the show. And I know there's been already some of those questions that I asked at the beginning, for people to tag at NASASpaceflight and things like that. So, D, how's those questions going? Like, what are people asking?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions in here. To start off, we've got a question from Daniel Webster, who's wondering, you just mentioned we saw the license come in. What were the main delays or restrictions in getting to that point of license approval?
I think it's a very, very good question. And I think what the answer you're going to get is a more mature answer than if you'd asked us maybe a few years ago. A few years ago, we would have been sort of saying, well, the government's taking too long, everything like this. But if we look at the whole length of time it's taken to come through, you had COVID, which took a lot of people out of the normal roles they would be in. So the government reallocated them to help support. So we give them dispensation for that. But also, we need to remember this has never been done in the UK. So understanding what was being happening and what was to happen, uh, there was 2 points of view. We thought if you let us test, we can then sort of work back from that point. Whereas the government was thinking, well, no, we want to make sure everything is as safe as possible before we allowed anything near a launch pad. So it was two different points of view, and it took a little bit of time for everyone to come to the middle and sort of start talking properly and collaborating properly. So when the Civil Aviation Authority, the CAA, were asking us for certain documents, it took time for us to put them in the style or the language that they wanted to understand. And so there was a little bit of learnings how to collaborate with each other for that license. And that's kind of what took there. You then have things like the environmental assessment, which is really, really important, especially in Scotland, for that. And these take a minimum of 3 months in the consultations in and around this. So that's everything to check that what you've got with your vehicle, where it will land trajectory wise, in case you're going to land on any endangered species or anything like that. Everything is checked down to the fine nails and of it to make sure that everything is in the clear. So there was a lot of little details that needed to be cleared up before we could be allowed to have this permission. And even now we have the license, there's still two or three conditions within that that we need to fulfill before we can actually take the vehicle to the pad, such as having insurance, making sure that our ConOps matches up with what we've given to Saxavord, if that's where we end up launching from, as well as just confirming little details on safety and security and things. So it was a much more complex process than I think the government first thought and us as a commercial company thought to start with.
Awesome. So we've actually got a lot of questions now. If anyone else has more, please. We love having more and more questions. Finn was wondering, sort of long term, like we have you have this next step with the license that you're working towards, but Finn was wondering if there were goals for things like ride shares, crew, anything like that in that sort of long-term, distant blue sky vision.
Very much so with the ride share. So the vehicle has been designed to sort of take larger payloads and be dedicated that way. So, for example, 300 kilo to its own orbit, taking to its final destination, nice and easy. But also, if we look at the third stage, that is the basis of the tug that I spoke about earlier, this allows us to start and stop within the vacuum. We've done this up to at least 20 times on the vacuum testing in the UK. So that really allows us to sort of do much smaller payloads, but constellations as well. So ride shares could be as simple as that, as doing, depending on inclinations and such. But that would be up to myself and my team to match with the technical guys to the manifests that we have the right payloads and the right flights for that. As for crewed, I think that might just be a step too far from the UK at the moment. I believe the biggest vehicle that can go from Saxavord is maybe a medium class launcher. So we could still be a few years out, I think, from seeing any crewed launches as from ourselves or any launcher out in the UK.
All right. Now, we've also got some questions about the propellant and oxidizer choices. We've got Zap fans who is wondering about HTP. Is that something you're able to touch on a little bit, and then we can maybe follow back up with engineers later? Or
No, I have a good bit of knowledge on this one, thankfully.
wonderful.
So I don't need to run away and ask a question on this one. So HTP really harks back to Black Arrow, as I said, with the Blue Streak, Black Knight, Skylark, they all had high test peroxide as their oxidizer and a kerosene base for their fuels. So we have kept that, and one of the reasons we've kept it is performance. It might be a little less than when you're using your cryogenics for oxidizers, but actually, when you're on a spaceport, we found this out when we were in Iceland, that the weather can be very, very nasty. And if anyone's ever been to Scotland, you can get 4 seasons in one day for that purpose. So the wind, anything like that can really affect a launch quite quickly. So for that purpose, basically being able to have your oxidizer and fuel stay on board for up to several days without any real issues. So you don't need to sort of decant that fuel or oxidizer out. Gives us a much better option to sort of hit launch windows for that purpose. And as long as it's safe to do so, that's the intention. So that was one of the big reasons behind that. Also having the heritage in the UK of using it before, it was a big plus point for us.
Awesome. Well, with that, we've got more questions in the queue that we will get to later, and I think I will throw it back over to Alex.
Yeah, and I have a question that might be related to that of the fuel and oxidizer options, because it's like you guys, so you just said before that you had a mobile launch pad configuration like what I have right behind me, I guess. Does that help that it is also something that's, as you said, it's a storable, you can keep it on the rocket for a long time, for also these operations of being a mobile launch pad? Like, I guess that sort of goes hand in hand with it.
Yeah, very much so. You do need to take special care when handling HTP, and I think that's why a lot of companies are hesitant. I was going to say scared, but I think hesitant is the best word to
Yeah.
use it for that purpose, just due to specialized handling. I know when I see the team using it, they look like Marty McFly in Back to the Future when he's got the sort of suit on, pretending to be an alien from outer space when they're handling it. So it takes a huge amount of due care with it. But for moving it about for mobile spaceports and even for testing at our test site in Scotland, being able to hold it and store it and not have to worry too much about evaporation and things like this. And it is not as energy intense as having cryogenics with it. So it does simplify a lot of things with that. And so it does really play into our strength with that mobile spaceport.
I don't know if you may be able to answer this, but I'm guessing that it's also easier in certain places to maybe find that sort of fluids and things like that, and rather, well, I guess liquid oxygen in particular might be a little bit less of a hassle, but other oxidizers or other fuel types like methane and whatnot might be more rare to find, right, than kerosene and peroxide, right?
Actually, that's a very, very good question there, Alex, for that purpose. So when we talk about the HTP, we've got a couple of things with it. So yeah, we have a regular supplier who can get it to us very, very easily. And actually, it's a substance that's used quite a lot in Scotland. So salmon farming, for example, uses it
Hmm.
at a much smaller percentage. So whereas we'll be using anywhere between 90 and 98% when we're doing testing in engines and launching, and they may be using 25, 30%, but we have a distillation process that we've got in-house, which allows us to buy it in at smaller amounts as well, or smaller percentage, and then sort of distill that up. Typical of a Scottish company distilling like a whiskey till we get to the strength that we actually need for launch purposes. But something that's actually became quite interesting to myself. So I am part of a sort of sector group called Space Scotland, and we were one of the first to bring out an environmental roadmap for space. And as part of that, I came across the blue hydrogen market, which is coming out in Scotland. And I've found out that actually one of the most convenient ways for them to store the hydrogen that's made out of this sort of recyclable process is actually to convert it into HTP. So there's actually becoming more and more available for us and much more easier with these processes coming to the market and as well.
Yeah, because we always have our own conversations here in we have, for example, the flame trench and whatnot, and we always are talking about the different decisions of different companies. But it's true that when it comes to a much smaller company, I guess, you have also that into account, that you cannot just go up to a to one of these people, these suppliers, and be like, oh, give me a ton of liquid hydrogen or liquid methane or something like that. So it also makes sense that you guys are going to the thing that is more available to use for your rocket. Like, that makes total sense. There's another thing as well. So the 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 s- the Skylark L rocket, it launched once. You guys want to launch it again. How is that like, we have already touched about the on the paperwork side of things, but how is the hardware side of things? Because obviously you've got the license now, but you have something to launch and use that license.
Yeah, that's correct. So again, ever since we did the launch in Iceland, about 6 months, maybe 8 months afterwards, we had the vehicle ready. So we've had the vehicle ready for approximately 2 years, ready to go when the license came in for that. So now, unfortunately, because the license is taking so long, sacks of orders actually fill up for this year. So now we need to make a decision ourselves to whether we decide to go and hold off and launch out Saxavord next year, or is it more important to the milestones in our own program to look at an alternative site, whether that be Oman, Australia, Andoya, or even going back to Iceland again. So these are options are open to us as a company, but it's a very hard decision. We fought tooth and nail to try and get this license to do it from the UK. So really, I know a lot of us want to see this. As I say, we want that launch to happen. So hopefully, the next time we speak, I'll have an answer for you.
Definitely. I'm really curious about, what the decision might be. You mentioned multiple different launch sites there in, running through, like you said, Oman, Australia or something like that. Can you tell us about the different launch sites that you might be thinking about for this? Because I'm curious, like you mentioned yourself that, so.
Yes, certainly. So part of my role is to make sure that we have the relationships that we will need going forward. And when I forecast for business purposes, I look at potential expansion of orbits, of where we could potentially launch from to service new markets. So I've already, for the last 4 or 5 years, been starting to speak with Southern Launch in Australia and the team down there. Most recently, ETLAC, which is established in Oman, and I believe has had one, maybe two launches this year and has another one coming up. And of course, you've got uh, Andoya and S-Range that have been there and been doing this for many, many years. So we're kind of spoiled in that regards, but also because we're spoiled and we're a little bit late to the party, we have to see what everyone's availability is. We've got costings coming in, so it's all finding out, well, how long will it now take us to export if we go to country A? How long will it take for the vehicle to be shipped to, so say for Australia, for example, how quick is the fast ship to Australia to get to the launch site? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of logistics and things that we now need to work out. But I think what you're actually seeing now, and this is partially due to geopolitics, but also people really aspiring to have their nation be a space nation and have launch capabilities as well. There's a lot more spaceports sort of coming to fruition. And the ones that I've mentioned are those that are actually been pretty well established or well run and well funded.
And once you guys have all of that put together, like, and you decide, okay, we're gonna launch from here, whatever site it is, what will be sort of that launch campaign? Are you gonna have to go through again all of these different tests, or like you're just gonna be doing like a quick test and then boom, launch and be done with it?
So certainly with the L for that purpose, I would expect that we'll have another hot fire testing for a
Hmm.
static test on it. I would expect we'd probably do that within the UK. And then when we ship it, we'll go for wet dress rehearsals on the stands at whichever side we go to. Uh, of course, the license we've got is for the UK. So any site we go to will have licenses that we will need to sort of put through. But the ones again that I've spoken about have all sort of guaranteed that you're talking sort of 3 months to process to get this through because of having the UK license already. So the benefit of that is by the time you get your export license to move the vehicle, you should have your launch license. And then by the time the vehicle gets there, you should have all your con-ops and everything for the new site rewritten, ready to go, and probably half the team on the ground as well.
And I guess, you just mentioned, for example, the export control license and things like that. Like, that's at least one of the things that you guys have already experienced with, right? Because you did this from Iceland. So like, how did that go? How was that process? And do you think maybe like doing it from Australia, for example, will change things too much? Like maybe in Australia now recently they had a launch from the Bounce spaceport, for example. So like, is that something that might be easier in places that they are a little bit more used to this?
It's very, very useful when there's things like a space bridge in place. So for Australia, they have a space bridge. And
Hmm.
what that means is the two governments have already spoken about this. They've put a lot of the framework in play, and they're a friendly nation. Whether it's for economy, whether it's for defense, whether it's for space, there's huge amount of ties between. So you've looking at defense, for example, you have AUKUS recently with the submarine deals and such between the US, the UK, and Australia. Because of
Mm.
all these relationships, it makes it much easier to sort of transfer something like this to a friendly country. Whereas if you went to take it to another country that maybe isn't so favourable with the UK and not flavour of the month, you're going to either be rejected or that pass to go there is going to be sort of held up for 9, 12, 16 months. So it's all about selecting the correct places to go with the correct sort of friendly nations, let's call it that.
Yeah. And so the Skylark, this rocket, the Skylark L rocket, it's obviously not the end goal. As we were mentioning, this is a suborbital rocket. And at the beginning, we were talking about, space tugs and things like that. So there's gonna be an orbital rocket that's the Skyrora XL rocket, right? Um, what's the sort of process that you guys are envisioning to get like from the Skylark L rocket up to the orbital one? Like, are you going to be launching a bunch of these smaller rockets to learn to make the bigger one, or are you developing it in the background, or like what's sort of that process?
Yeah, thanks for that, Alex. So certainly we've got one more Skylark L to go. So
Hmm.
that's the vehicle that we've just been talking about that's ready in Glasgow at this moment in time. But we've actually been working in conjunction over the last sort of 8 years, building stages of the XL to go up and through. So if you look back in the past, so you may see some of the videos of doing the third stage testing with the 3.5 kilonewton engine on the third stage. That was done, I believe, think 2020 December when we did this. I remember it being Christmas Eve actually because we were all in a container waiting for it to go, and then we realised that we'd actually done a mission test, which meant it would close off for about an hour. And then restart the engine and then close back off and then restart the engine. So on Christmas Eve, we're all sort of locked up for about 2 hours, getting close to 8 o'clock at night, thinking we we're all going to get divorced and kicked out of the house. Uh, we then moved on to the second stage, which again, I believe was around 2021. And this was tested and static tested in Machrihanish, which is just for those that don't know, to the west of Glasgow. It's out on the sort of coast. And if you see the video for that, you see beautiful blue skies, which is never normally in Scotland. So this third and second stage has been done. We have the fairings made and been testing at this moment in time. And really now where we're at, we released a little camera shot of the 9 engines for the first stage recently, showing that they're all completed, all their testing and ready to go. We're currently got, I think, one or two tests left on the last engine, and then also doing some destructive and non-destructive testing on the first stage tanks, and then we can move into integration of those and then head towards a sort of first stage static test. So we've been moving quite swiftly along with that in sort of in conjunction. As I said, because the vehicles have been delayed by a couple of years, the whole aim was that all the information that we got back would affect any changes we would maybe make. But we've just had to sort of take that on the chin and move forward.
Yeah, and I'm sure some of the people might be might be wondering, like, what's sort of the size and scale of the Skyrora XL rocket? Because obviously that's an important thing to wrap your hair around when you're talking about, hey, this is the overall rocket, but is it like Falcon 9 size? Is it more Electron size? Like, what sort of the size range and mass to orbit, for example, that this rocket is going to be carrying?
Certainly. So it's roughly just over 22 meters in length, or height, and 2 meters wide for that purpose. So that takes roughly 315, that's 315, kilograms into sun synchronous or polar orbits up to around 500 kilometers. And that will be the main workhorse for us when it comes to the demonstrator, which we're hoping was originally aiming to be Q4 26, but with the delay to the L, it's probably going to push it into Q1 27 now, I would expect.
Okay, so not that long from now, even though, you said maybe up until early 2027, that's still like a year and a half. That's when you least expect it, it's already here, right? I guess. But you were mentioning that you guys have on the first stage, you got 9 engines, and I'm seeing we have queued a picture of those. There we go. These are flight engines, by the way.
They're the flight version. So we've went through, I want to say 14 test engines. I would need to double check my figures on that. So please, if I've quoted that wrong elsewhere, but they have all went through testing to ESA standards by the team, our own test site in Gore Bridge, and these are the ones that will be going on the actual flight. So they're, I believe there's one that's got a small test left to go on it, and then they're ready to be integrated onto the tanks.
Nice. And are these like, because obviously there's a couple of ways at the very least to put the 9 engines, and I know this was one of the things that we talked before the show, where it was like, is it like octaweb style, like Falcon 9, where it's like one in the center, 8 around, or it's sort of like a 3 by 3 grid?
Yeah, when I saw that question earlier, I had to really go and run and ask my team. Uh, it's never a question I've been asked before, and it's never one I've actually deemed to ask them. So when he asked me, it was a good learning point for myself. So before then, I would probably just say they were all facing down so the fire can come out the bottom. But when I spoke to the team, they confirmed to me that it is going to be a sort of rectangular grid 3 by 3 for that purpose, and that
Okay.
will be the format of the engines.
So we're gonna have a tic-tac-toe there for the engine section. That's nice. We're gonna go now to D because it's been a while now since we've gone through the chat questions. I'm really curious because I'm seeing the chat just for people watching right now. I'm seeing the chat on the side of my eye, so I know there's already a few questions in there. So D, what's up with those questions from the chat?
Yeah, so we've actually got a lot of questions in the chat here. I'm gonna start off with Psychove, who was asking if like the second pad at Saxford is ready, and I will ask like which pad specifically there is being used and what sort of infrastructure is needed. Are you able to work with sort of a blank slate and ship stuff there for your ground infrastructure?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. If I'm honest, I don't know the full ins and outs of Saxavord at the moment. As I said, when we were told earlier this year that we couldn't be on the pads this year because obviously RFA tested earlier and had the anomaly, which had one pad, so they have another pad that they're using. Orbex has recently moved after mothballing Sutherland and taking a pad. So that kind of leaves us without one at the moment. So there would need to be one built. However, as you saw with the video footage and the photos you've been showing of of Iceland, we don't actually need a pad for this. All we need is a bit of flat ground. We can bring our infrastructure in and around for that purpose. And basically, all we need to do is lay down a couple of metal plates to keep debris out of the engine. The whole spaceport in a box, as we like to call it, is about 7 containers, and that included when we did this in Iceland, our own range and our own control room. So we wouldn't actually need to even have all of that with us because Saxavord does have that. So we were trying to be cheeky earlier in the year and say, well, we just need a space in the field that we can within your perimeter, so it's still in regulated spaceport as such. But unfortunately, I don't think they were too keen on that idea. But going forward, as I said, hopefully when we start picking up discussions and negotiations again, we can see whether we have to wait for a pad to be built for us or if there's a pad that would be usable for that purpose. So really, on the status of pads, to answer your question, I'm not entirely sure. This has been a few weeks, but I know I'm with them next week in Utah, so I'll speak with one of them then to find that out. But also, we really don't need a pad for the L, only when we get to XL.
All right. Now we've also got a lot of questions about future plans for customers. So we had Gabriel GG asking if you would potentially be partnering with like NASA to launch certain NASA missions. And we had another one, if I can find that, asking about partnering with the European Space Agency for European Space Agency missions. So what sort of partnerships do you have planned or upcoming or that you're hoping to get maybe?
Certainly. So at the moment, with the manifests or potential manifests that we have coming in, we do have a lot of ESA sponsored missions that are coming in, and we're quoting for and hoping to sort of capture. But everything depends on how the demonstrator goes and things like this. As you expect with rockets, there's people are a little hesitant to jump on the first one. Second one, they're a bit more happier, and then third one, they'll normally give you a lot of money to do so. So with ESA, there are contracts there that we're competing to try and get in and win with them. So hopefully I can say watch the space. And again, we do have payloads on the demonstrator for XL, but it's just a little bit too early for the sign off for press release on those. So we will make sure you get a copy of those when we start to release who they are. In regards to NASA, that's a very interesting question. So I have seen them do payloads and have vehicles launching out of Australia. And I think once the UK starts to do it more regularly, those may come a chance as well. So we're seeing the backlog, not only in the US for it coming along for pad space, but actual launching these. So I think it may happen. And there may be discussions between UK governments, as I said, that these deals that go on different levels, saying, well, we have a payload to go up. Do you have space? Okay, can you take ours? And then vice versa, back and forward. And it'll be sort of government contracts. So it may not be directly with NASA. It could be the UK government and vice versa. So that's kind of what we're expecting might happen in the near future. What I know is currently happening is a huge amount of sort of small constellations. Uh, Scotland makes the most sort of satellites in Europe for that purpose, with the likes of Spire, Clyde Space, and Albert Orbital. Having those, they have numerous amounts coming out a year again, and those sort of contracts, if we're able to capture them fully, would allow manifests up to at least the next 6, maybe 10 years for the vehicles being able to launch 10 times a year. So there's a huge amount going there. I think the big question has been since COVID, the market, there was a huge projection in the market going up. That has kind of stalled after that. So it's figuring out what's happening now. You're seeing the growth has slowed. So I think you will see very much a mix of governmental and commercial payloads coming out of governments, ESA, NASA, and any other country. So we're seeing actually a huge push just now out of Africa for satellites being built as well. So it could be many different nations in the same vehicle.
All right. Now there's one more question I want to ask here, which is for the first flight of Skyrora XL. If you maybe don't have a customer payload on there, would there be some sort of fun payload for Skyrora there? We've seen some fun payloads from companies in the past.
So we certainly would like to see what else we can. So we do have some on XL, but actually, if we want to talk about fun payloads, on the one we did from Iceland, uh, one of the companies that we were working in close with when we were in Iceland was the company that made EVE Online, the video game. So we had miniature versions of some of the ships on board for that as well. There was hops that was going to be made into space beer, and even some artwork because we were hoping to recover. So it was going to be the first artwork of its type in space, and returned and hopefully increase its value. So we have taken a little bit tongue in cheek and had some fun on the previous L. For that purpose, and I'm sure if we've got some space on the XL, there might be some fun things to go in there too.
I will say Jay Keegan in the background is recommending haggis. So I feel like I had to bring that up. And with that, I'll throw it back to Alex.
Yeah, we've seen certain other companies recently trying out local food as their payload, so that will be funny. Anyways, this question now as we laughing about this, but anyways, so going through all of the different questions that I always have, I'm obviously gonna ask probably the biggest two questions. I'm actually surprised. I have not seen these two questions in chat, and I know people are always asking about those. Uh they are the really like the biggest ones, I guess, and that is reuse and bigger rocket. So go ahead. Is there any
Well,
reuse? Any plans for a bigger rocket?
so in regards to reusability, the smaller rockets don't have as big a sort of window for pay for basically making profit.
Mhm.
That being said, that doesn't mean we've thrown the idea out the window completely. I think what you're seeing with SpaceX, and I want to say it was Honda recently who had the landing rocket, I believe it was in Japan. Uh, you can't just throw these ideas out there, especially in Scotland. The idea of not even looking at reusability on something is just a major no-no and red flag for a company. So when we launch Hell, one of the things that we can do is we can look at the parts when we bring it back in. And this was the idea in Iceland. We wanted to see how the engine came back down. How did it compact? Did it just flat as a pancake when it hit the water? Has it corroded? What can be used? What can't be used? Because we're doing a lot in advanced manufacturing, looking at new materials when we're doing 3D printing and such, it's all about figuring out what is going to be there. So we have one eye on the reusability. It may not be at the forefront at the moment, but that's just because you don't know what you don't know yet, as I said, because we've only L has had that 1 or 2 meter 2 kilometer climb before it hit the water.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same impact if it comes down from 100. So we need to figure out that. We have done some experiments in house, sort of trying to capture engines as they've been falling and all of this to see what's going there. And with the L, there's parachutes for it to come back down to so we can sort of see. And this is all around taking a look at future adaptations that can be added into the vehicle. Larger vehicles, well, we have always had a roadmap for that, whether it's L, XL, XXL. Yeah, those are the names that we have for that purpose. So they have been in the roadmap, but the one thing that we really look at is making sure that our technological milestones is the plan that we stick to. We're not going to be rushed by whether it's a competition, whether it's there's a mass need for a medium launcher or anything like this. Because at the moment in Europe, they've not proven out the need for a small launcher, let alone a medium launcher. So it would be a little bit silly for us to chase that straight away. So we want to get the XL done, up and running, make that the workhorse. And then when that's doing, we already have plans for larger engines, which we're looking at. And then we can look at the next stage of vehicle. So you'll probably see an XL 1.5 before you'll see an XXL, I would expect, for that purpose. But yeah, there's certainly plans there to sort of increase that payload.
Yeah, because we're looking before at those engines from the Skyrora XL. Those are called the Skyforce engines, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's correct. I'm not entirely sure where the name came from, but the 70 kilonewton engines were Skyforce, which was the name that was given to them a few years ago. We do throughout the testing we've done with them, they've performed really well.
Mm.
To the fact actually we've pushed them to that max 70 kilonewtons and above by quite a bit. So we know that actually what we're quoting them as is actually under what they can hit. So we know we've got room to maneuver with them, which is nice. But everything we do, as I say, it's all about that safety. It's about the safety of the team, the safety of the people in the area, the environment. After all, everyone loves to see a launch, and everyone loves to see one if it goes wrong as well. We know that. But at the end of the day, we all just want to celebrate with a pint. That's a job done well, sort of thing. You want to make sure that everyone comes home with all the fingers and thumbs.
Yeah. And so obviously for, to develop any larger rocket and things like that, you will always obviously need a bigger rocket engine and all that. So that takes a lot of time and effort. And I guess it makes sense to right now just concentrate on what you've got in front of you, the Skylark L, Skyrora XL as well, right? And then whatever comes, it comes, right?
Well, to give credit where it's due for my team. So, as I said,
Yeah.
we've got our chief. I'm trying to remember what his chief operations officer, Dr. G.J. Marlowe, and his team. They're great for everything, keeping to the milestones, making sure we're hitting everything we need to be to get the vehicle to the launch pad. But then we look at our sort of propulsion team. So, Michael and his team, they have already designed the next engine. They've already designed the next turbo pump. We have prototypes of these already ready to go
Oh.
and sort of be tested. So they are there. How long will it take to be on a vehicle? I'm guessing probably 3 to 5 years, something like that. You need to go through your testing, your iterations, things like that. But I expect you'll see footage of them well before you'll see them launch, of course. But certainly it's not like I'm talking 10, 20 years in the future. I'm talking next generation, sort of 3 to 5 years on that after the main launch, of course, because the problem is if you start to switch engines on the vehicle, you then need to apply for a new license. And well, no one really wants to wait for that long. So that's why you need XL to be running in the background while you apply for those new engines on the new vehicle and such.
Yeah, well, I was not aware that there was actually a lot more work than just, far future thoughts, I guess. But that's cool to know about that. So let's go back to the Skyrora XL, of course. Let's, future stuff. Okay, we dealt with that. So it's this traditional sort of three-stage rocket where you've got 9 engines in the first stage, a vacuum optimized version of it in the second stage, right? But then you also have a third stage, which you mentioned that can be used as a space tug. Is that something that, like, you could say, okay, well, let's put this third stage on a Falcon 9, for example, on a transporter mission or something like that? Is that something that could be done, for example?
From a technical point of view, it most certainly could be done. It could be launched with other vehicles for that point. I think the only thing that will hold that back to start with is just the lack of heritage. So I think once we have the demonstrator up there and after the first few commercial missions, it will then be proven, that engine will be proven. And the 3.5 kilonewton engine that's been designed by Michael and his team is fantastic. It's got so many different capabilities, whether it be interplanetary missions, lunar landing, things like this. It can be adapted for a huge amount of different missions. So I think the more heritage it gets with the actual platform, which will become the tug, it then opens up a whole new commercial product, which hopefully I can sell to other companies that may want it.
Yeah, I mean, business development, right? And that's the whole deal. It's one of those things that we've had other companies as well that they are developing their own space tugs and things like that, and it's always that question of you've got a launcher that you can use individually, but then you can also not just like the good thing of having that space tug is that you're not constrained by your own launch vehicle. That once, as you mentioned, once you have the heritage, then you can use it maybe on other vehicles, and that means more missions, more money, I guess, which is good for business.
That's it. And it's one of the things that Skyrora we've done really well since day one. It's looked at that diversification. So we've looked at everything we've had to do because the UK was basically an unexplored supply chain when it came to building vehicles and rockets. It was very difficult, so we had to do a huge amount in house as such. So we developed a 3D printer. The 3D printer allows us to print 2 meters by 2 meters, so it's one of the biggest in Europe, possibly in the world. But on top of that, it also allows us to have a second head on that printer, which actually subtracts from it as well. So we can actually machine and print on the same machine, which is it saves you taking the part off and allows to do that. So that's one potential spin out for the company that we've been looking at. And we've had previous contracts with the likes of Spirit Aerospace on that. You then look at Space Tug, as you said, and then other things that come to fruition through whether it be people coming to us asking us to potentially design a new engine for them or a turbo pump. These are requests that come through my mailbox quite often, and seeing international partners. So we've been able to diversify, not and help to push forward. So when a lot of companies are maybe looking for funding to try and keep going, we've been able to use the skills that we have in house to sort of generate those funds in house. So we've not had to go to the market and say, well, we need 100 million to get to this next stage. We've been wonderful. Vladimir's put, I believe, 60, 70 million into the company out of his own pocket. But we've also been able to bring in these larger contracts to sort of help push us forward and keep us moving and the momentum going.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely have a chat with Daz maybe about using that 3D printer. He loves that stuff. So there's this thing as well with the whole set of products that and services, because you just mentioned the 3D printing as well. There's this other sort of dilemma, I guess, or talking point, which is that there seems to be already too many small sat launchers, right? It's almost like there's just a lot of launchers out there, not a lot of stuff to launch. Do you see that because you're, business development, head of business development, so you must see this kind of thing coming through, right? Where it's like, oh no, we really need these launch services. Like, is it something that you see a lot of this need for in the market?
I do hear a lot coming out of the marketplace, and again, this is my first time heading over to Utah and the small sat in this coming week. And the reason for that is we're hearing more and more from the marketplace with people sort of being knocked down the manifests because whether it's a priority government payload or whether SpaceX is looking for more space for Starlink, companies are finding it harder and harder to get into orbit for that purpose. So there is a wealth of winnable contracts out there. But you raise a good point, Alex, that there's also a lot of small launchers being there. But I think the biggest point with that is, can you really say we're all small launchers until we've had that successful launch? We're there. We're pushing to be at the table. And I think that's the big thing at the moment. And I think all of the names that you see there at the moment may not be there in 5, 10 years' time. It's not unusual to see companies try, push, and maybe not get to the full distance that they want to go to, and then have to convert into different products or something specialist, something they specialized in. So I think that's, well, the market is there. It is there for maybe 2 to 3 launchers within Europe for that purpose. Anything above and beyond that, I think after that is going to be sort of people will fall by the wayside.
Interesting. So then I guess it makes sense then to also have the larger rocket as well in the plans, I guess, for future potential markets, I guess. But I want to touch on this as well because you just mentioned it might be just a few launches for the European market, and that is interesting because we've seen at the very least like attempts at trying to get more of these small sat launchers and heavier launchers sort of away from the traditional launchers like the Ariane and Vega and things like that. Do you think that that's the right approach, that Europe should be doing this stuff where it's like, let's build the payloads that are then are going to be launching on these smaller rockets? Like, it seems like that's sort of a newer thing. What do you think about all of those developments?
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. I know
Yeah.
it sounds like I'm sitting on the fence on that,
No,
but I
it's okay.
think what it comes down to is basically what land that we have to launch from. So if we look at Ariane, for example, it launches out where near Brazil, Alcantara, and things like that, and French Guiana, I believe, are the sites that it tends to go from. So
Mm.
you couldn't take that vehicle to Andoya. You couldn't take that vehicle to Shetland. They just wouldn't fit safety, everything like this. So I think partially what you're seeing, the purpose with this is the environment creating the technology, or it's dictating what technology needs to be there for that. Uh, so yeah, it's a little bit strange in that regard. I think people think because it's smaller, it's easier to do. Uh, and when I mentioned that to my team, I normally get something thrown at me and told it's actually the opposite way around. The bigger it is, the easier it is for them to build it, sort of thing. So I don't know if there's been a thinking that it was going to be easy, because there was. I know when we first started out, I think there was about 8, maybe 9 companies within the UK saying they were going to build a launcher, and almost all of them have fallen by the wayside by now, with no technological advancements at all. So these sort of things, it is a difficult market to be there. You need your technology to do the talking for it. And I think that's why Europe is kind of looking at that, because a lot of the smaller satellites are coming out of Europe. As I said, Scotland makes most in Europe. So for the satellites that are coming out there, I believe anywhere between 3 and 6 U on average for that purpose, size wise. So that means the market size of that, or the actual launch size required, is much smaller. So I really think it's the market that originally dictated where they wanted to go with that. And then, as I said, the geography.
Yeah, and I guess that's also an important point to touch on, because it's like recently there's, in the past there was this whole geo return policy as well, but now there's a lot of emphasis as well on diversification and this sort of need of, yes, there are a lot of launchers out there, a lot of small sat rockets and whatnot, but it's also European rockets. Like, you don't have to go to Rocket Lab, for example. You don't have to go, like, if you're a European company, you can launch from here, right? And I feel like that's also another talking point, that it's there, but it doesn't get touched on very very much. Like, it just seems like, yeah, well, Europe is building rockets, they're launching their own things, and that's all they can do. And I think that's in this day and age, at least, in especially in the geopolitical points that we are right now, in the situation that we are right now, it seems to me, I don't know what you think about this, but it seems to me that it's a lot more important, having a company based in the United Kingdom being able to launch payloads from not just the United Kingdom but also other countries in Europe. Like, what's your take on all of this? Because I feel like that's an important thing to have.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Geopolitics has really changed in the last sort of 5 years for that purpose. Uh, for the UK, it's great. They can build a launcher, they can build a satellite, they can get the data back, and they can launch it all in one legal jurisdiction for that purpose. Okay, technically Scotland and England have slightly different laws, but it's one legal jurisdiction really when it comes under it for control purposes. With Europe, whether it's the UK, okay, the UK is technically not Europe now after Brexit, but you have Andoya as well. It's that basically having the ability to sort of look after your own domestic needs for that. You don't need to worry about potentially having to negotiate with a partner who may not want you on board, or doesn't see your requirements as key for that purpose. And I think that's what you're seeing now, and what people are waking up to. Uh, and, and I believe now the fact that data, well, you're seeing what's happening with the invasion from Russia into Ukraine. You're seeing Israel, Palestine, and all the other conflicts that are sort of kicking off around the world at the moment. Satellite data is becoming as key to them as it is to protecting the penguins or monitoring wildfires and even piracy in the sea. All of this is now sort of coming down through there. So I think nations have woken up to realize that space isn't just a nice thing to have, but an actual requirement for going forward. It doesn't matter if it's, let's just say, defense, civil, finance. There's space touches every aspect of your life. It's something I say when I get to go out and speak to sort of kids when I do outreach is, well, how many of your parents use sat nav to get you here, how many of you play Pokemon Go, the Harry Potter version or Jurassic Park version. That's all done by satellite data and things like this. It's just trying to bring back what the data actually does to day-to-day people. And I think while normal everyday people don't still have a good grip of this, I believe governments are now realizing how important this data is and how important it is to either have a partnership with a country that allows you to get that or to have your own sovereign capabilities.
Yeah, that is again one of those things that, maybe from the outside, and in certain places like the United States, they have their own sovereign launch capabilities, satellite capabilities, and all that. And it's often overlooked that Europe doesn't really like it. It does have that sort of stuff, but it's quite complicated. And there's not a lot of launch cadence and things like that. There's a lot of complications there, right? And so it feels like this new era that we are in right now, where there's multiple launch companies, I think that's really really great. And that goes back to another question that I always have, which is like, do you think that being here from Europe, I know technically it's not the European Union, but still Europe, right? The United Kingdom is still part of the continent, even though it's a different island, I guess. But do you think that has affected differently, as if differently compared to, for example, being in the United States? Like maybe they have more of an edge because they have access to lots of things. There's maybe less regulations than here. Like, do you see that as a benefit, disadvantage? Do you think it's more complicated to build a launch company here, for example?
Yeah, I believe so. And I think the big thing that we can see here uh, is you're allowed to fail in the US. And I think that's huge. You can start a company, you can fail. You can brush yourself off, get up, start another one, you can fail. And you can rinse and repeat and do this until you're successful. You try that in the UK and in Europe, the investors don't have that risk appetite. The minute they see you've maybe had one, if you're lucky to get a second one that's started and failed, they don't look as favorably on that purpose. And there's a lot to be learned out of failure, whether it's a failed rocket launch, whether it's a failed acquisition, or whatever the case may be. Failure drives you and brings you to the next level on these things. So because that's attitude is completely different in the Europe and the UK, that has made things a little bit more difficult. And again, you look at the other options, which is the funding aspect of that, on top of not just individual investors, but how the different countries work. So whether it's ESA versus the US government as such, the size of contracts and potential grants that come out of the US when it came to building launchers like Astra, ABL, things like this were huge. They had hundreds of millions to do so. But if you ever see, you'll never see a UK company, or sorry, a UK government or many European governments giving those same size of contracts. Imagine trying to explain that to the person in the street, that you're using the GDP to build rockets when schools are in disarray or the healthcare is in disarray for that purpose. All of this and these other social issues at large, which actually is what a lot of people elect the governments for, it just doesn't work the same way. So it has been a little bit of a difficult practice in the UK or Europe to get these companies started and to get actual good enough funding. Because I know when we first started out, I was told, yes, you're talking 150 million to get your first vehicle to a pad. And when you see the likelihood of the first set of funding that came out of the UK government was, well, for ourselves, was about 3 million through the CSTS grant and ESA. It shows the giant differences compared to what's going on. So there was a lot there, but I also think that's helped us. It's allowed us to look at different aspects and how we do things. So we're much smarter, we're much agile. You see that with the container-based approaches and modular launch, the making of the 3D printer. All of these things have been done through necessity, and I think they've made the company stronger. So on one hand, it's been detrimental and sort of more difficult to get the company to be successful, but on the other hand, it's made us be a lot more innovative.
Yeah, I guess if we always, obviously the United States, they have a lot more money to handle and to give out and award contracts and all that. And so of course it's a little bit different here in Europe, but I guess every piece of help helps, I guess, every little contract here and there. And as you mentioned, that also makes the company be more aware of their expenditures and things like that. So I want to go back to D because I think there's a few more questions in our queue, and then we'll get to the end.
Yeah, so we've got a couple more questions here. I want to ask a few from Dpod Dolphin Productions, actually. So first off, he was wondering why the sort of stand down from launching from Iceland after applying for the UK license. What was the sort of reasoning for that?
Well, the main reason was we were led to believe that the license wouldn't take as long as it did. Is the main answer for that. Uh, then, as the process went on, deviations take longer. The decision is, do you stick with it or do you go? After all, you've only at the time we only had the one vehicle. We weren't intending making a second vehicle for this purpose. If we had two, yeah, let's go for it. Dual approach, easy to do. We have one team looking after the UK license, and we already know the process in Iceland. But it was that ambition to launch out of the UK for it. We wanted to have that first manufacturer of a vehicle in the UK get that license, be the first to launch that manufacturer to launch that vehicle in the UK, which we're still on sort of par to do. So those were the main reasons. We've not abandoned Iceland in that regard. We still have quite big relationships with their government and things like this. We know they have high hopes to join ESA and things like this. So we encourage and try and help where we can. And as I say, they include us in a lot of discussions when it comes down to it. Sometimes too many discussions, and we'll get told off by our own government for being involved in certain things sometimes. But Iceland wants, just like every other country, wants to be that space nation. So we've not sort of cut ties in that regard. So they are there. They understand that we've our want and desire to do this out of Scotland. Especially myself being a Scotsman, if my accent hasn't given it away, to see that done on my home soil is something that I really can't wait to see.
So next up, we like asking these sort of questions about the company itself. So what's sort of the size of Skyrora right now?
Okay, well, I think the easiest way is probably to go by head count. So again, I love all these little stories as I sort of alluded to earlier. So when we first started out 8 years ago, we were what, 5 people in a small office. In fact, there was 8 people in a five-seater office. I was sitting on a water pump. And now moving 8 years on, we have a permanent headcount of 85 and a handful of contractors. And the aim is once we start to move up to commercial launches, that number will rise to about 300 permanent staff.
All right. And then one more. We love giving the opportunity to talk about how people can get involved. If they have a background, are there any sort of openings, or where should they look out for to work for Skyrora?
Certainly, I think the big one is to check with the website first and foremost, as we tend to put up the roles as and when they come in. At the moment, because of the milestones that we're rushing into, we've put a pause on the internship program that we normally have, because when we have an intern, and we tend to like to give them 2 or 3 people around them, fully sort of seasoned veterans, let's say that, seasoned veterans within the company that can help guide them when they need this. So when we did the launch from Iceland, for example, one of our interns was the people that did the logistics to get everything there. So when you're an intern for us, it's not just photocopying and running around. You're literally going knee deep into any problem or issues that we're solving, and you're part of the team for that. So we didn't think it was fair that we couldn't give them the same support for that. So hopefully we'll see a return of that, and that would come up via the website. And same with the graduate apprentices. But there. LinkedIn's another good one. We tend to put the jobs up on there. And every so often we'll get a specialist who's moved out of the US or somewhere else, and they'll fire us an email to on the website. There's an address for sending CVs into. And I can't say we've often taken people out of there, but we have maybe one or two that have managed to be successful from that route as well.
All right. And with that, I think I'll toss it back over to Alex.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting hour and almost and a half. It flew by. I think I've run out of questions, but I have a final one though, and that is, will you be back once you launch the next Skylark?
Certainly, Alex. I'll be more than happy to come back to speak to you and Dee and the team to celebrate hopefully a successful launch with some more footage and probably a huge amount of stories that we can share as well.
I also, I think we like to live stream launches. I don't know if that might be possible to live stream the Skylark. I know that at least we had Debbie Strang from Saxaboard here in March, and she said there's at least good connection there for that. So if you guys launch from there, we'll might be in touch. But thank you for being here, Derek, and happy to have you back anytime.
It was my pleasure, and thank you for the invite again.
And of course, also thanks to DWise for grabbing all of those questions from the chat. And thanks also to our viewers, like you guys watching this. It always help us being able to tickle the algorithm, I guess, and have all of those views and have it sharing with other folks. But of course, thanks to our members as well, our launch directors and flight engineers. You can see there's a lot of names there. I think we need to put on our store one of these reading glasses, I guess, especially for the launch directors. Look at that font. But yeah, those are obviously very appreciated, that support, and of course it's what makes these shows happen. And another person that makes these shows happen is Jay Keegan, our producer, which produced this show and also arranged these interviews. So thank you, Jay Keegan, for that. And of course, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
And here we go.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers, fly! Yes! They go down to nominal.
Fighting downside of speed off. Bring in speed off. Off. It's orange! Orange 45! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! Look at this! Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting with the flare, correct?
Yikes. You bet. We don't need any more of these.